In this session, we're going to take a look at adding another muscle to this character's back. So what we have here are our muscles that we just added and our character rig and the character kind of walking around. We're going to add one of these other muscles to the character's back, and we're going to actually use it to deform the character's back as a large stone comes down. So let's unhide the character and we'll get the rig put away. And we're going to keep our muscle layer up because we're going to start building a muscle. And let's just put our character into or out of animation mode. We'll go over to the motion panel and pop him out of animation mode so that he's kind of ready to be rigged. And then there's a couple other pieces that go to this character. So if you open up the character layer, you can see there's a couple other pieces that are hidden, and one of them is this stone object. We'll just unhide that stone object. And if we go into the material editor, we can just switch to compact. And we can apply this base material to that as well because that has all the same UVs and everything like that. So you can see that there's this stone, and this is going to kind of come to rest on the character's back. So what we're going to do is something that's a little bit interesting and different. We're going to use this muscle to actually deform the character's back inward using this as a collision object. So to do this, we first need to create our muscle. So let's hide this stone again, and we'll go in the top view, go to Create, Helpers, choose Cat Objects, and instead of a muscle strand, we're going to use this cat muscle. So let's just drag one out here in the top view that's, about the size of the character's back. And we can give it a kind of reddish color so it fits in with our muscles. And now what we want to do is set up the segments on this and position it. So these corner pieces are what we're going to use to position the 4 places on this. And if we just go and turn on edge faces, we should be able to see how many faces this has. We probably want it to be a little bit more dense than this, so let's go to the Modify panel and adjust the amount of segments that it has. We'll bring it up to something like 5 by 5, I think is good for right now. So the first thing to do is to put this in position, and we want it just basically wrapped over this character's back. To do that, I'm going to turn on snapping, and I'm going to right click here and turn on vertex snapping. And you can turn off grid point snapping if you have that on right now. And what we're going to do is just kind of snap each one of these corner points to a point on the character's mesh. So we want to kind of pick points that are going to be on the character's body. So maybe like there and there would be good points. So let's just line this guy up. And we're going to select so that when we roll over the snap, we get this little circle that's yellow. And we can pick that, and then we can snap to places on the mesh. Okay, so let's move this entire thing up. We'll turn off snap to do that, and over just so it's, kind of closely aligned with the character. And now what we can do is we can grab these pieces. We'll turn snap back on by pressing S, and we can snap to different points on the character's mesh. So we want to maybe snap to right there for that piece, and on the other side to the same place. So we'll grab this. You want to make sure that you grab this little yellow circle, and we're going to position that there. And we'll do that on these 4 pieces towards the end here. And I think I'll just pick this piece on the back that kind of comes to a point, and the same place on the other side, which is right here. So we'll grab that, just kind of snap it there. Now you can see that the mesh is definitely underneath the character. So if we just go into wireframe, you can see that we really need to adjust the kind of Bezier handles that work with this. So we can get into doing that right now. Let's just go to helpers so that we'll only select helpers. We can turn off snapping and select these helpers and start to move them into place. So we'll grab those 2 and we'll grab these 2 and start to kind of position them and move them into place. And then let's just go over here, and we press F3, then we should be able to see that there. And we could take these and maybe move them out a little bit so that we have it positioned on the character's back. And of course there are the other ones in the top here that we may need to move out. So we'll select those helpers, kind of move them out so that they conform to the back a little bit better. And the same with the ones on the top. Just pressing F3 here to toggle, and we want to grab these two Bezier-like handles, move those up, and then we can kind of toggle it to get that into where we want. And now we'll go into the left view and adjust this a little bit more. So something like that. Bring this up, something like that. So it doesn't have to be super precise, but just so that it's wrapping around the character's back. So now we're going to use this deforming muscle to deform the character's back, and we're going to use a stone collision object to kind of come down and flatten out the character's back. Now, before we get to skinning this and bringing in the collision object, it's going to be a good idea to bind this to the rig. So let's go back to our layers palette, bring the bones back, and just hide the mesh for right now. And as we've seen, the things that control these muscles are these little dummy helpers here, and move it. So these are what we want to link to some piece on the rig. And the nice part is, of course, just like the legs, we can link them to wherever the corresponding piece is. So if the character twists its spine or does something else like that, the muscle should move properly. So we can kind of link these to the portion on the spine. Make sure that you are out of helpers only selection mode. So I'm just going to go into the left view, make sure that I have both of these guys selected, and hit it like that. And I'll press F4 to turn on edge faces because that'll give me a better idea of what it's actually linked to. I can see the little flash, and I'll select these two, and we'll link them to this portion of the character, or actually maybe back here because this is a little closer to the back. So let's just check this out. We'll select the character and go to the motion panel and press play, and we can see that muscle deforming and working with the character's rig, which is exactly what we want. Next, let's just bring our character back, and we can hide our rig for now because it's all linked up to where we want it to. And we're going to start working with this muscle. So let's bring our stone in so that we can create a collision object for it. And we could just use the stone, but you really would prefer to use some sort of proxy object so that we don't have, a real complicated mesh to calculate moving in as a collision object here. So let's just go and create a box. We'll go in the top view. And just drag out a box. And that's on the muscle layer right now, and that'll be okay for now. We'll probably put it on the rig layer later. Just move this up, and what I'm actually going to do is let's quick align this to that box, and then we'll need to kind of rotate it into place a little bit because the orientation of the box is a little bit off. So we'll just rotate this so that it kind of fits in the general shape of the stone that's going to sit on top of the back of the character. So go into the left view, and we'll rotate that there. We'll use the local coordinate system for that. We can rotate this down. And in the perspective, we can do, some small modifications if we want, until we're happy with the basic shape. So really all we're looking for this to be is a simple collision object in order to have it seem like when this stone drops on the character's back, the back muscles have to kind of spread out and some of these delts will, push out to the side and things like that. Okay, So now that we have this collision object, we're going to add it into the muscle as a collision object. So let's go back to our layers and just hide the stone for right now so that we're just dealing with this object here. We'll select the muscle and we can call this back muscle. Scroll down a bit, and this is a middle muscle, so that's fine. And you can see we have collision detection. We'll click on Add and choose this. Now, one thing that you'll notice is if we toggle into wireframe mode, that basically what happens is this kind of gets sucked onto the box because it thinks that it's pushing through the box, which is fine. We just need to kind of orient it, and so you can see it's actually pushing through from this side. So on the muscle, we're going to scroll down and use the option, select the box as the collision object, and we're going to say invert. And let's just select this box and call it stone proxy. And now what you'll see is when this comes in from this side, it's going to push down. The only tricky thing in here is, as far as the invert goes, for some reason it's flipped the normals. So if we hop in a wireframe, you'll see that it doesn't start pushing until it hits this side. So all we really need to do is apply a normal modifier to our box, and that flips the normals, and then it will push on this side. So now we have this stone proxy object that'll come in and start deforming this muscle and pushing out the mesh once we skin it. So we can see that here. It pushes that in there. One thing I like to do with these objects is go into display and set it to display as a box. That way I can easily see how this is deforming that muscle in places. If we just hide our entire character, when we look from here, we can see how this is flattening out that mesh. Okay, so now what we need to do is bind this all together. So let's bring back our stone and line this up. And we're just going to take the stone object and link it to the stone proxy. So now when that object moves, we'll move that stone down. Okay, and we can hide that stone for now again. And the last thing that we'll do here is skin our mesh. So we're pretty happy with the way that the muscle is moving and all the rest of that stuff. We'll add this to the skin wrap of the mesh. So it is important that we're in our standard T-pose here. We're out of animation mode while we do this. So we're going to select the character. We'll hop in to our skin wrap and we'll say add. And what we want to add is that muscle. So the back muscle gets added there. And then we can pop out. We can adjust some of the parameters, but I think in general it's probably going to deform the mesh, so we can kind of see that coming in and deforming the character. I don't think that we're going to go that extreme, but we're going to kind of push it in a little bit. We can bring the stone back, and you'll see that the stone is actually curved underneath, so while we do want to push this in a bit, I think we want to adjust the stone so that it will fit better on the character, and you can do that by just moving the stone down slightly so it fits on the character and we still get that deformation from the character. So something like that I think is pretty good. Now, what we want to do is actually move this into place and have the character kind of come into form. And what we'll need to do is just blend between our, non-deforming state and our deforming state. To do that, I'm just going to move this entire piece back here. And we're going to bring our bones back in. Go and select our characters, rig, and we want to have this go into animation mode. And we're also going to want to make sure that we link this piece right here for our stone proxy to the character so that it follows along with the character. So one thing that I like to do is this guy just kind of snaps into a pose. And for any of these simulations that we're doing with muscles or were we to do cloth later to simulate some of the other pieces coming off, you kind of want all this to blend into shape pretty easily in the beginning. So let's go in here and we're going to try and make that sort of animation. I'm going to set the timeline to have a negative space. So we'll go with -10. And we're going to blend between two different layers. So we already have our cap motion layer on here just to kind of see what the skinning is, and we'll just say that that's what we're going to use for the character walking and at least our tests. We want to add in another layer, so let's add an absolute layer. And let's press play here. So what you can see is we have the absolute layer, and unless that is off or the global weight is set down to 0, we won't see any of the animation that we have here. Okay, so let's hop back out of there and make sure that we have this guy all rigged up on the back. We want to link this to a portion of the character's bones. So we'll make sure that we have that linked. So we're going to take this and we can link it maybe to this center back piece or depending on where we want it to sway, but we'll go with that for right now. And then we can bring this back in. When we go back into cap motion, that should snap into place and be moving along with the character, which is what we want. So to get this to kind of blend between this action and this action, all we're going to do is animate that global weight. It's a pretty easy way to blend between the layers. So we'll go to maybe 0, which will give us a good amount of time. I don't think I would need that for this type of animation, but if we started to do things with cloth or other things, we might want a little time to settle into the pose. So, we're going to bring this down to 0. And set the global weight to 100 here. So now we have this keyframe and it kind of blends in up there. And we could probably just give us some time for things to settle in and just have that blend be over a few frames there. So maybe we'll make that at frame -5 or -6. And then what we're going to do is move this piece into place. So we'll go over to the left view and we're going to move it on the local axes between 0 and 5 so that everything is kind of settled into place there. So we're going to push this down on the character. You can see his back kind of flattening out there and flattening out on the other side. And we'll move it back up in the beginning. So now we have this animation of that settling into place. We'll get rid of the keyframe at 0 if there was one there. And now we have the character kind of moving around. Might bring it up a little bit more. He's a little bit squashed. Okay, so now what we've done is we've added a second or third muscle to the character that is actually deforming the character's muscle from outside objects, which I think is a pretty interesting way to use these muscles. Traditionally, you'd be putting them maybe on the shoulders or the neck so that they deform from the inside out. But this is an interesting way to use it because if you had a character with, a large stomach or something like that, and you needed them to bend over a rail, you could push that stuff in using these deforming objects that are muscles, and I think that's a pretty cool way to use it. And we've also kind of blended in between our skin pose and moved some of those dynamic objects into place, and then started that animation going. The next thing I want to do is just add a little bit of a jiggle to this piece. So this piece, may flop around a little bit even though it's a heavy rock on the character's back, and we want that to, affect the muscle and affect some other stuff that's in the scene. Now the thing we used to do that on these muscles down here was flex, and we could certainly do that for this as well. But we'll just take a look at using a spring controller for, just a taste of something different. So let's go back to our frame 0 here, turn off auto key, and just for the sake of it, we'll pop this character out of animation mode, just so that we make sure that we're not mucking anything up. Now to add some secondary action to this, we're just going to grab the control proxy object, go to animation, position controllers, and choose a spring controller. Now you'll notice one thing about this, and that's that when you add that spring controller, the object moves to the parent space of whatever it happens to be linked to, which is the spine bone in this case. If we want to, we can put another controller in between so we don't get that type of thing, and we'll look at that in a moment. But for right now, I'm just going to actually move this back into place, into the general position that we wanted. And we'll want to set up our animation for it again because this will have frozen our transform. So we're going to move this down, back into place over those first few frames. Just until we're happy with the positioning on the character. Now when the character walks, we should have some secondary action from the spring controller, which is going to get propagated down. So let's go in and put our character back into animation mode. And you can kind of see this guy flop around a little bit. We can make it a little bit more intense by selecting the proxy object, going into the motion panel, and scrolling down to the spring dynamics. We can adjust things like the mass and drag. So we just set this mass up to 800. You'll see that this will really flop around on the character's back. And I think maybe it's a little heavier than that, so we could bring that maybe back down to 400 or something. And as this is flopping around, there should be the interaction and collision that will be deforming the muscle and deforming the character's back. Now, I wanted to show this without having to put in the little extra node for the spring controller because you can put that in and just move it into place, just because I wanted it to be straightforward and not too confusing as to what we're doing. But now I want to go back and add in that controller because it's a little more clean workflow and it will probably help you out a bit. So I'm going to go back to that scene. And you'll see that we have all the same stuff going on here, but we haven't added our spring controller quite yet. Before I do add the spring controller, what I'm going to do is create a small helper object. So I'm just going to go into helpers and choose a dummy or a point object. We'll choose a point object, and I'll just click that there. I'll give the point a box just so that it has something that I can see. And I'm going to name this Stone Spring. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of put this in the middle of the rig. So I'm going to go into our layers. Let's get rid of the mesh right now because we don't need that. And we actually don't need to worry about the muscles either. I would say that now this piece is becoming more part of the rig. So we'll go to bones and we'll add it to that and hide the muscles. And I can see that I created my point helper on the muscles layer as well, so I'll add that in too. So now what I want to do is I want to take this point helper and I'm going to align it to our box in both position and orientation. Okay, so now these have the same position and orientation, and I'm just going to put this in the middle of the hierarchical chain. So this was linked directly to this back piece, And now what we're going to do is just link this to that and then to the back piece. And that what'll happen then is when we apply the spring controller, this is the orientation that it will take on. So we're going to link that to that, and then this to the character's back. Now you can see that when we select this, we can go to the animation menu, position controllers, and choose spring. And because it's aligned and linked to this little spring controller object, we'll just call it control, because it's not actually the object with spring. It's just allowing us to have that in the correct position. Then we can have that there. Now the one thing that we are going to want to do is position this again. So this will kind of have to move in and animate. So let's unhide the other pieces, at least the character here. And we can move this spring down, and that's what we're going to want to animate, that spring control, because that's what everything is linked to. And then between 0 and 5, we'll move this down here. You can see it push the character's back out. Move it up there, just get rid of that 0 keyframe that's made by default because we're working in negatives. Then just let's grab this platform, turn on our animate, and you can see we have that spring happening there, which is affecting the character's muscle and the back. And we can go back in to the spring and change those properties that we had before. So maybe make this 450 just to make it a little bit more bouncy, so we can kind of see it here in the viewport, and it comes along with the character. So in this section we've added another muscle to the character that's doing something a little bit different. It's actually acting as a collision object. We're skin wrapping into the character, and we're having that collide with an outside object that would kind of deform the flesh, not necessarily the muscle, but the flesh of the character, as this stone, heavy stone, kind of comes down on the character's shoulders. We also added some secondary action, this time with a spring controller instead of using the flex modifier, but you could definitely do it with the flex modifier too. It just depends on what you're more comfortable with. We saw that when you apply a spring controller, it's usually pretty good to have a intermediate object parented so that you don't get that shift in position, which can be really helpful. Lastly, we did a little pose to animation blend here using our cat layers. So when we hopped in here, we added a new absolute layer and we blended that entire pose in, which is really useful for moving objects into place before the character starts to animate, especially if you need simulations of muscles or hair or deformation or anything like that. And I think that's it for adding some muscles to our character.